The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. This tranquil scene belied the tension that gripped the waters, where the fate of nations teetered on the edge of a knife. It was 1944, and the Pacific theater of World War II had become a chessboard of strategic moves and countermoves. The latest square on this board, the focus of immense military interest, was a group of islands known as the Marianas. Strategically positioned, the Marianas were more than just specks of land in the vast ocean. They were keys to the very doorsteps of Japan and the Philippines. For the United States, capturing these islands meant gaining airfields within bombing range of the Japanese mainland, a critical advantage in their island-hopping campaign. For Japan, the Marianas were the final barrier, the last line of defense against an encroaching American force that threatened their homeland. As stars began to dot the evening sky, the commanders of both the American and Japanese fleets gazed out across the water, each lost in their own thoughts. Admiral Raymond Spruance, the American commander, stood on the bridge of his flagship, USS Indianapolis. He was a man of few words, his sharp mind always working, analyzing. His calm demeanor had earned him the respect of his men and the nickname Electric Brain. Spruance knew the weight of what was to come. The Marianas could be the turning point in the Pacific War, and he was at the helm. Miles away, aboard the Japanese aircraft carrier Taiho, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa mulled over his strategy. The situation was dire. Japanese naval power had been waning, hit hard by previous battles, but Ozawa was determined. The Marianas were not just another battle. They were a symbol of Japanese resilience and strength. Losing them was unthinkable. The air was thick with the anticipation of battle. American submarines and recon planes had been tirelessly charting the movements of the Japanese fleet, while Japanese forces had been fortifying the islands, preparing for the inevitable invasion. As night settled in, the men aboard the ships tried to rest, but sleep was elusive. Sailors and pilots alike knew that the coming battle would be unlike any other. They were young, many far from home, caught in the maelstrom of a war that had already reshaped the world. The stage was set, the players in position. The Marianas were about to become the epicenter of a conflict that would echo through history. As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of battle, the Pacific Ocean, serene under the moonlight, gave no hint of the fury that was about to be unleashed. The early hours of June 1944 in the Pacific were marked by a flurry of activity as both the American and Japanese forces made their final preparations for what was to be a monumental confrontation. On board the flagship USS Indianapolis, Admiral Raymond Spruance, alongside Admiral Chester Nimitz, was deep in strategic discussions. Their map tables were littered with charts and position reports, the Marianas marked prominently. Nimitz, a leader of unwavering resolve, understood the stakes. "This is more than a battle," he said. "It's a direct assault on the heart of the Japanese Empire." Meanwhile, the Japanese fleet, under the command of Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, was mobilizing with a sense of urgency. Despite dwindling resources and the loss of many experienced pilots, the spirit of the Japanese sailors and airmen was undiminished. Ozawa, aware of the challenges but unfazed, was determined to meet the American force with a cunning plan. His strategy hinged on luring the American fleet into a trap, utilizing his carriers as bait. On the eve of battle, the American fleet, an impressive array of firepower, was on high alert. The deck crews worked tirelessly, readying fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes. Below deck, pilots and sailors received briefings, their faces etched with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Among them was Lieutenant Michael Harris, a young American pilot assigned to the USS Enterprise. His Hellcat fighter, freshly painted with the insignia of the famed Big E, was a symbol of American air superiority. Harris, though new to combat, felt a surge of confidence as he checked his aircraft. The stories of previous battles echoed in his mind, fueling his determination to make his mark. Contrasting this, on the Japanese side, Commander Hiroshi Takamura, a veteran pilot, prepared for his mission aboard the carrier Taiho. The weight of the situation was not lost on him. He had seen too many comrades fall, too many young pilots sent into battle unprepared. Yet, he held on to a glimmer of hope, believing in the Bushido spirit that had long defined the Japanese warrior. As dawn broke, the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean became a chessboard for these two mighty adversaries. The American fleet, utilizing superior intelligence and reconnaissance, maneuvered into position, while the Japanese, adept in their own right, executed their plan with precision. The first skirmishes were aerial, American recon planes probing for the location of the Japanese fleet. Below, on the Japanese carriers, pilots like Takamura readied their planes, knowing that the battle for air superiority would be critical. The tension was palpable as both sides anticipated the other's move. In the American command center, Spruance and Nimitz pored over the latest intelligence reports, making adjustments to their strategy. Ozawa, equally astute, deployed his forces in a defensive formation, ready to spring his trap. As the day progressed, the first reports of contact came in. American submarines had spotted parts of the Japanese fleet. The game of cat and mouse had begun. Spruance, cautious yet decisive, ordered a limited strike to test the Japanese defenses. In response, Ozawa maneuvered his carriers, keeping his main force hidden. The waters of the Pacific, once calm, now rippled with the churn of naval vessels and the buzz of aircraft. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the script of war was about to unfold in a dramatic clash of wills, machines, and men. The sun set on the Pacific, casting long shadows over the fleets. The night was restless, filled with the anticipation of the impending battle. For many, it was a time of reflection, of thoughts of home and loved ones. For others, it was a moment of focus, of sharpening the mind for the trial to come. As night gave way to the early light of dawn, the American and Japanese fleets, now on a collision course, prepared to write a new chapter in the annals of naval warfare. The Marianas, quiet and unassuming, were about to witness a battle that would echo through the corridors of history. The night before the great battle was a mosaic of tension and stillness, a paradoxical calm before the storm. On the American side, aboard the USS Indianapolis, the mood was a blend of determined focus and quiet contemplation. Admiral Raymond Spruance, ever the strategist, was finalizing his plans, his mind a whirlwind of scenarios and countermeasures. His counterpart, Admiral Chester Nimitz, stood by the starboard rail staring into the darkness, perhaps mulling over the enormity of the impending battle and its implications. In the cramped quarters below deck, sailors and pilots like Lieutenant Michael Harris tried to snatch a few hours of rest. Harris, lying in his bunk, couldn't help but think of his family back home. His thoughts were interrupted by the low murmur of his fellow pilots, some reciting prayers, others double-checking their flight gear. The air was heavy with a mix of apprehension and an unspoken camaraderie, born of shared purpose and uncertainty. Miles away, the atmosphere aboard the Japanese carrier Taiho was equally tense. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, a man of stoic demeanor, moved through the corridors, his presence a reassuring sight for his crew. Commander Hiroshi Takamura, sitting alone with a cup of green tea, reflected on the battles past. He thought of his younger comrades, many of whom had never faced combat, and hoped their spirit would carry them through what was to come. As the night deepened, the vast Pacific Ocean lay like a dark, slumbering giant, oblivious to the human drama unfolding on its surface. The stars overhead were brilliant, casting a celestial glow on the warships below. On both sides, the final orders were issued. For the Americans, Spruance's command was clear. Maintain vigilance. Be ready to launch aircraft at first light. For the Japanese, Ozawa's orders were equally firm. Be prepared for battle. Defend the Marianas at all costs. In these final hours, there were moments of unexpected humanity. On the USS Enterprise, sailors gathered around an old radio, listening to a broadcast from San Francisco, a fleeting connection to a world far removed from the realities of war. Aboard the Taiho, a group of pilots sat in a circle, quietly singing a traditional Japanese folk song, a reminder of the homes they were fighting for. As dawn approached, the first light of the new day began to touch the horizon. The sea, once dark, slowly revealed the massive silhouettes of the naval fleets. On the flight decks, pilots like Harris and Takamura readied themselves, their aircraft lined up like silent, deadly birds of prey. The air was now charged with a palpable sense of impending action. Thousands of miles from home, these men were about to engage in a battle that would not only determine the fate of the Marianas, but also shape the course of the war in the Pacific. The sun rose, casting its first rays on a day that would be remembered in history. The eve of battle was over. The Marianas turkey shoot was about to begin. As the first light of dawn broke over the Pacific, the tension that had built up over the night found its release. The vast ocean, once a tranquil expanse, transformed into an arena of war. On board USS Indianapolis, Admiral Spruance issued the order that set the battle in motion. American aircraft loaded with bombs and torpedoes roared to life, their engines a thunderous herald of the coming storm. Meanwhile, Admiral Ozawa, aboard the Japanese carrier Taiho, watched as his own pilots took to the skies. He knew the odds were against him, but the resolve in his heart was unyielding. The Japanese fleet, though outgunned and outnumbered, was ready to fight with every ounce of their spirit. The initial engagements were a dance of death in the skies. American Hellcats, piloted by men like Lieutenant Michael Harris, clashed with Japanese Zeros in a high-stakes duel. The air filled with the sound of gunfire and the smell of smoke as planes spiraled into the sea. Harris, his heart pounding in his chest, locked onto a Japanese fighter. With steady hands he fired, watching as his target plummeted into the abyss below. Below, the naval giants maneuvered for position. The American battleships, with their massive guns, began a lethal ballet, aiming to pummel the Japanese fleet. The USS Iowa, its guns thundering, sent salvos towards the Japanese vessels, shaking the sea with its firepower. In response, the Japanese fleet unleashed their own fury. The Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, returned fire, its shells screaming across the sky. Ozawa, ever the tactician, maneuvered his carriers, keeping his main force hidden, while his destroyers laid a smokescreen to shield them. Amidst the chaos, the human element of war was ever present. On the decks of the American and Japanese ships, sailors scrambled to load guns, repair damage, and tend to the wounded. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the roar of battle. In the midst of this maelstrom, Commander Hiroshi Takamura piloted his Zero with a grim determination. Each maneuver, each dive, was a dance with death. He knew that every second in the air could be his last, but his duty to his country and his comrades drove him forward. The battle raged on, hour after hour, with neither side yielding. The Marianas turned into a crucible of fire and steel. Spruance, observing the battle from the Indianapolis, remained calm, his mind a whirlwind of tactics and calculations. He knew that the key to victory lay in air superiority, and he directed his carriers accordingly. As the day wore on, the toll of the battle became apparent. The sky was dotted with plumes of smoke where aircraft had fallen. The sea, a graveyard of sunken ships and the lost souls who manned them. Yet, amidst the devastation, there were moments of extraordinary bravery and sacrifice. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, the battle showed no sign of abating. The Marianas had become a testament to the ferocity of war, a place where the fates of empires were being decided. The clash of titans, as it would come to be known, was far from over. The night would bring new challenges, new strategies, and the unwavering courage of those who fought in one of the greatest naval battles in history. The fifth day of the Battle of the Marianas dawned with an air of ominous finality. As the sun rose, casting long shadows over the fleets, the American and Japanese forces braced for what many knew would be the decisive day of the conflict. High above the Pacific, the sky was set to become a canvas for a display of aerial might and desperation. Admiral Raymond Spruance, aboard the USS Indianapolis, gave the order that unleashed a wave of American aircraft. Squadrons of Hellcats, Avengers, and dauntless dive bombers filled the sky, a formidable force aimed at breaking the back of the Japanese fleet. Lieutenant Michael Harris, his Hellcat's engine roaring, joined the assault with a mixture of fear and determination. In stark contrast, the Japanese carriers, under the command of Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, launched their own planes into the fray. Commander Hiroshi Takamura, piloting his Zero, led a squadron into the aerial battlefield. The skies above the Marianas became a whirlwind of dogfights, with planes weaving and diving in a deadly dance. The Americans, benefiting from superior numbers and more advanced aircraft, began to dominate the sky. Harris, in his first major engagement, found himself in the thick of the action. He locked onto a Japanese Zero, expertly maneuvering his Hellcat for the kill. His heart raced as his target burst into flames, a mix of adrenaline and remorse coursing through him. Below, the American bombers began their deadly work. Dauntless dive bombers plunged towards the Japanese carriers, releasing their payloads. The sky was alight with explosions as bombs found their marks. The Japanese fleet, caught off guard by the ferocity and coordination of the attack, scrambled to respond. Aboard the Taiho, Admiral Ozawa watched in grim silence as his fleet came under heavy fire. Despite the chaos, he issued orders with a calm urgency, directing his remaining planes to counterattack. The Japanese pilots, though outgunned, fought with a fierce determination born of desperation and duty. The battle reached its zenith as American dive bombers scored direct hits on several Japanese carriers. The Hayo and the Shokaku were engulfed in flames, their decks an inferno of fuel and ammunition. The sight was a testament to the destructive power of air superiority. Meanwhile, Takamura, his Zero damaged in a dogfight, made a desperate attempt to return to his carrier. He witnessed the destruction of the Hayo, a sight that filled him with a profound sense of loss. With his fuel running low, he made a risky landing on the battered deck of the Zuikaku, his plane skidding to a halt mere feet from the edge. As the day wore on, the toll of the battle became increasingly evident. The skies, once filled with the roar of engines and the crack of gunfire, grew quieter. The American forces, having decimated the Japanese air capability, began to withdraw their aircraft. The sunset on that day painted the sky in hues of red and orange, a fiery backdrop to the smoke rising from the burning ships below. The Marianas Turkey Shoot, as it would come to be known, was a display of air power that changed the course of the Pacific War. On the decks of the American carriers there was a sense of exhausted triumph. Pilots like Harris returned to their ships, greeted by the cheers of their comrades. But the victory was tempered by the knowledge of the cost, the lives lost in the unforgiving skies. On the Japanese side, the mood was somber. The loss of their carriers and many of their planes was a blow from which they would not recover. Ozawa, his fleet in ruins, ordered a retreat, his strategy undone by the overwhelming American air power. As night fell, the Marianas turkey shoot drew to a close. The battle had been a turning point, one that shifted the balance of power in the Pacific firmly in favor of the United States. The sky above the Marianas, now calm, bore witness to a day of unparalleled aerial combat, a day that would be etched in the annals of military history. As the air battle raged above, the naval forces of both the United States and Japan prepared for their own deadly dance on the waters of the Pacific. The sun, now high in the sky, cast a harsh light on the fleets, revealing the scars of battle and the determination of the men who manned these steel behemoths. Admiral Spruance, his face set in a mask of concentration, surveyed the scene from the bridge of the USS Indianapolis. The success of the air assault had given the American fleet a significant advantage, but he knew that the battle was far from over. The Japanese, though reeling from their losses, were not defeated. Their fleet, still formidable, was preparing for a counterattack. On the Japanese side, Admiral Ozawa, aboard the Taiho, was faced with a dire situation. His air force had been decimated, leaving his ships vulnerable. Yet, in true samurai spirit, he refused to yield. He ordered his remaining ships into formation, ready to engage the American fleet head-on. The first salvos of the naval engagement echoed across the water as the American and Japanese battleships traded fire. The USS Iowa, its guns booming, targeted the Japanese battleship Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Navy. The exchange was a titanic clash of firepower, each side unleashing their fury in a bid to gain supremacy. Lieutenant Michael Harris, having returned from the air battle, watched from the deck of the Enterprise as the naval battle unfolded. The sight of the giant warships exchanging fire was awe-inspiring and terrifying. The sea around them was churned into froth by the shells, and the air was filled with the roar of explosions. On the Japanese side, Commander Hiroshi Takamura, his plane heavily damaged, had no choice but to watch the naval battle from the deck of the Zuikaku. The sight of the American firepower was disheartening, but he clung to a faint hope that the Japanese fleet could still turn the tide. The battle raged on, with neither side giving ground. The American destroyers, swift and agile, darted around the larger ships, launching torpedoes at the Japanese vessels. The Japanese destroyers, equally daring, returned fire, their torpedoes cutting through the water towards the American ships. In the midst of this chaos, individual acts of heroism shone through. American sailors, braving the inferno on deck, worked tirelessly to load guns and repair damage. Japanese crewmen, their ships battered and burning, fought to keep their vessels afloat, refusing to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the day wore on, the balance began to tip in favor of the Americans. The Japanese fleet, battered by the relentless assault, started to falter. The Yamato, its armor pierced by multiple hits, began to list. The Taiho, struck by a torpedo, suffered catastrophic damage, its deck erupting in flames. Admiral Ozawa, witnessing the destruction of his fleet, made the difficult decision to order a retreat. The remaining Japanese ships, battered and bruised, turned and fled, pursued by the victorious American fleet. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, the naval engagement drew to a close. The waters of the Pacific, now calm, were littered with the wreckage of ships and the memories of those who had fallen. The Marianas Turkey Shoot had proven to be a decisive victory for the United States. The Japanese fleet, once a formidable force in the Pacific, had been dealt a crushing blow. The path to the Japanese mainland was now open, and the end of the war seemed closer than ever. For the men who had fought in this epic battle, the victory was bittersweet. They had proven their valor and skill, but the cost in lives and material had been high. As they prepared for the next phase of the war, they took a moment to reflect on the day's events, knowing that they had been part of one of the greatest naval battles in history. The setting sun cast a somber light over the Pacific, illuminating the aftermath of one of the most decisive battles in naval history. The waters around the Marianas were a stark testament to the day's ferocity, strewn with the debris of warships and aircraft, a grave for many brave souls. Admiral Raymond Spruance stood on the bridge of the USS Indianapolis, his eyes surveying the horizon. The victory was theirs, but it was not without cost. The toll of the battle was written in the plumes of smoke rising from the sea and the weary faces of his men. Spruance's thoughts were with the fallen, those who had given their all for the cause of freedom and peace. On the Japanese side, the retreat was a solemn affair. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, aboard the battered remnants of his fleet, felt the weight of defeat. The once mighty Imperial Navy had been significantly diminished. The path to the Japanese mainland lay open, and with it, the realization that the tide of the war had irrevocably turned. In the American fleet, the aftermath was a time for regrouping and reflection. Ships busied themselves with rescue operations, plucking survivors from the water. Medics and nurses worked tirelessly to tend to the wounded. Among them was Lieutenant Michael Harris, who, despite the triumph in the air, found no joy in the destruction below. The reality of war, with its human cost, had truly set in. On the Japanese carrier Zuikaku, Commander Hiroshi Takamura assisted in damage control efforts, his heart heavy with loss. The proud fleet he had served for so long was in ruins, and the future seemed uncertain. Yet, even in defeat, there was a sense of resolve, a determination to face whatever lay ahead with dignity and honor. As night fell, the sea became a mirror, reflecting the fires still burning on damaged vessels. The silence of the night was a stark contrast to the day's chaos. Sailors and pilots, both American and Japanese, took a moment to mourn, to remember friends and foes alike who had perished. The Marianas Turkey Shoot had not only been a battle of fleets and aircraft, but of human courage and resilience. The men who fought and died had shown the extremes of bravery and sacrifice. Their stories, some told, many untold, would become part of the tapestry of the Second World War, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who fight in the face of overwhelming odds. In the days that followed, both fleets would lick their wounds. The Americans, emboldened by their victory, would press on, their path to victory in the Pacific now clearer. The Japanese, facing the stark reality of their situation, would regroup, their spirit unbroken but their capabilities severely diminished. The Battle of the Marianas would go down in history as a turning point in the Pacific War, a clash of titans that reshaped the geopolitical landscape. It was a reminder of the harsh realities of war, the sacrifices made, and the enduring human spirit that prevails even in the darkest of times. In the days following the Battle of the Marianas, the calm waters bore silent witness to the monumental events that had unfolded. The fleets had moved on, but the echoes of the battle lingered. For those who had participated, the time had come for reflection and contemplation. Admiral Raymond Spruance, aboard the USS Indianapolis, took a moment to reflect on the victory. He understood that while the battle was a significant triumph, the war was far from over. The path to the Japanese mainland was now open, but he knew that each step forward would be hard fought. In the quiet of his quarters, Spruance penned his thoughts and reports, his words a mix of pride in his men's achievements and the somber responsibility of command. Lieutenant Michael Harris, the young pilot who had seen his first major action in the skies over the Marianas, sat on the deck of the USS Enterprise gazing at the horizon. The battle had been a crucible, testing his skills and resolve. He thought of the friends he had lost and the enemy pilots he had faced. The lines between heroism and tragedy, victory and loss, seemed blurred in the aftermath. Meanwhile, the Japanese forces, retreating to regroup, carried with them the weight of defeat. Commander Hiroshi Takamura, aboard the limping carrier Zuikaku, grappled with the reality of their situation. Despite the outcome, he felt a deep sense of pride in his comrades' bravery and the unwavering spirit of the Japanese Navy. The defeat was a bitter pill, but it was also a lesson in resilience and honor. Back in the United States, the news of the victory in the Marianas was met with jubilation. It was a much-needed boost to the American public, weary from the years of war. Newspapers heralded the success, and families celebrated, even as they mourned those lost. The battle was not just a military victory, but a symbol of hope and a step closer to the end of the war. In Japan, the mood was somber. The loss at the Marianas was a stark reminder of the war's changing tide. It brought home the harsh truth of the conflict's direction, stirring a mix of resolve and apprehension about the future. The Marianas Turkey Shoot, as it came to be known, was more than a battle. It was a turning point in the Pacific War. It demonstrated the power of air superiority, the importance of intelligence and strategy, and the unyielding courage of those who fight. As the sun set on the calm waters of the Pacific, it marked the end of a chapter in the war. The reflections in the aftermath were a blend of pride, sorrow, and the unspoken knowledge that the road ahead would be fraught with more challenges. The Battle of the Marianas would be remembered not just for its strategic importance but for the human stories of bravery, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of those who fought in the vast expanse of the Pacific. As the Pacific War continued to unfold in the months and years following the Marianas Turkey Shoot, the significance of that battle became ever more apparent. It stood not only as a pivotal moment in the conflict but also as a symbol of change in the art of naval warfare and a testament to human courage and ingenuity. In the United States, the victory in the Marianas was seen as a turning point. The American public, bolstered by the news, remained steadfast in their support of the war effort. For the servicemen like Lieutenant Michael Harris, the battle was a defining moment in their military careers, a time when they rose to the challenge and played a part in shaping the course of history. In Japan, the loss at the Marianas had far-reaching consequences. It marked the beginning of the end for the Imperial Japanese Navy's dominance in the Pacific. The defeat forced Japanese military leaders to reconsider their strategies and come to terms with the possibility of defeat. For men like Commander Hiroshi Takamura, the battle was a sobering reminder of the war's brutality and the resilience required to face its challenges. Admiral Raymond Spruance and Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa, both key figures in the battle, would go on to be remembered as two of the most skilled naval commanders of their time. Their decisions during the Marianas campaign would be studied by future generations of military strategists, serving as lessons in leadership, tactics, and the importance of intelligence and technology in warfare. As the years passed, the Marianas Turkey Shoot became a subject of military study, a case in point for the evolution of aerial combat and carrier-based warfare. It highlighted the importance of air superiority, technological advancement, and the role of intelligence in modern combat. For the veterans of the battle, the memories remained, a mix of pride and sorrow. They carried with them the stories of heroism and sacrifice, tales of friends lost and enemies faced. These stories, passed down through generations, kept alive the legacy of those who fought in the vast expanse of the Pacific. The echoes of the Marianas turkey shoot resonate through history, a reminder of a time when the world was engulfed in conflict and the fate of nations was decided in the skies and on the waters of the Pacific. It stands as a testament to the human spirit, the will to overcome insurmountable odds, and the relentless pursuit of peace and freedom.